Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Wednesday, May 12th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Some breaking news. Rady Children's Hospital is now scheduling appointments for children aged 12 to 15 as early as tomorrow. KPBS reporter John Carroll says the news comes out on the heels of a recommended approval today from the CDC Advisory Panel.
Today's nearly unanimous vote from the CDC Advisory Panel on vaccines.
14 yay and 1 refusal. The motion passes.
Led to this news from County Supervisor Nathan Fletcher.
We fully expect and are highly confident that by late tonight, we will be in a position where the vaccine will be opened up for 12 to 15-year-olds.
Fletcher says the Western States Working Group, comprised of public health officials from California, Nevada, Washington, and Oregon, are scheduled to meet this evening to review information from the CDC and FDA.
It is our expectation that tomorrow morning, 12 to 15-year-olds will be able to receive the vaccine.
The 12 to 15-year-old group will only be able to receive the Pfizer vaccine for now. Fletcher says if everything goes as expected, nearly 176,000 of those young people will be able to get their first shot with the approval of a parent or guardian. They'll also need some sort of ID, like a birth certificate or a school ID that shows their age.
Ready? 1, 2, 3, stick.
Fletcher also says the county now has plenty of vaccines on hand. Supervisor Nora Vargas says that means efforts can be made to vaccinate a whole new category of workers in Mexico.
Soon, hundreds of employees that work in the U.S.-owned companies across the border will be able to receive their vaccine as well.
Though the big news of the day is the 12 to 15-year-old eligibility, Supervisor Fletcher began today's news conference with a statistic that shows just how far we've come in San Diego County.
Today, we're only reporting 94 positive cases. You have to go back almost a full calendar year to have a day in which we were under 100 positive cases.
A sign that the light at the end of this long tunnel is getting brighter by the day. John Carroll, KPBS News.
If you have a Rady Children's MyChart account, you can schedule a vaccination appointment directly. More information on teen vaccine eligibility should be available on the county's website later tonight. If you want to set up a vaccination appointment for yourself or for an eligible family member, you can find a location close to you at kpbs.org. Just click on the vaccines link that you can find on our homepage. When COVID-related restrictions on California businesses are lifted next month, the mask-wearing mandate could be eased as well. Governor Gavin Newsom now says that when the state's tier system is retired on June 15th, masks will likely only be required in large-scale indoor gatherings. Federal and state officials have started easing mask-wearing rules, particularly in outdoor settings with other fully vaccinated people. California has had a statewide mask mandate since June 18th, 2020. The Padres are down at least 5 players as 2 players have tested positive for COVID-19 and 3 others have been placed in quarantine due to contact tracing. And this begs the question whether or not some of the players are vaccinated. KPBS reporter Alexandra Rangel has more on the team's vaccination efforts.
Padres star players Fernando Tatis Jr. and Will Myers tested positive for COVID-19 Tuesday, placing them on the injured list. After contact tracing efforts by the team, 3 more players were pulled from the active roster and placed in quarantine. Although being fully vaccinated doesn't guarantee you won't contract the virus, it is unclear whether or not players who tested positive have been vaccinated or if the Padres require vaccines. We spoke to local legal analyst Dan Eaton, who says employers can mandate getting the vaccine, but most are not.
The general practice so far is encourage and not mandate. I think as we get closer to crunch time, you are going to see more mandates.
We reached out to Padres officials about what percentage of their team was vaccinated and about their vaccine policy, but that information was not disclosed. MLB coronavirus protocols require individuals who test positive to isolate for at least 10 days. Players who are fully vaccinated and have been in close contact with a COVID-positive person are not required to isolate and can resume playing. The MLB has strongly encouraged teams to get vaccinated, incentivizing them with looser restrictions if 85% of players and staff are vaccinated. Alexandra Rangel, KPBS News.
Customs and Border Protection announced that the number of unaccompanied children crossing the border decreased in April, bucking a months-long upward trend. KPBS reporter Max Rivlin-Nadler takes us inside the new numbers and how San Diego's own convention center is playing a huge role in the sheltering and processing of these young migrants.
The amount of unaccompanied children crossing the border fell 9% in April, from a record high in March. California's own border sector saw just a modest rise in the number of apprehensions of unaccompanied minors. Those numbers held steady for April. But even without the rise along its own border, San Diego has played a vital role in sheltering thousands of these unaccompanied children. Since late March, the San Diego Convention Center has sheltered 2,629 unaccompanied children in total, according to numbers obtained by KPBS. 989 children have been reunited with family members or sponsors, with those numbers increasing in recent days as the process has been streamlined by the federal government. The average stay is 30 days, while the average population of children has hovered around 1,100, 400 fewer than the convention center's capacity. Currently, 71 children are in isolation after testing positive for COVID-19. Emergency intake sites like the convention center have allowed the federal government to quickly move children out of ill-equipped Border Patrol facilities along the border. Currently, only a few hundred children are in those facilities, and none for more than 72 hours. Now the job becomes getting these children out of facilities like the convention center and other temporary spaces before they revert back to their original uses. In San Diego, that will be in mid-July, meaning that case managers there have 8 weeks to reunite children with families or sponsors before they lose the space to hold them, something they'll accomplish if current trends hold.
It might be grim to reduce an issue like this down to numbers, but that's essentially what it's become for the Biden administration and their local partners. Right now, the math is adding up for the Biden administration, with cities like San Diego playing a huge role in helping unaccompanied children find shelter during this turbulent time along the border. Max Rivlin-Nadler, KPBS News.
Governor Newsom turned his focus to schools today as he continues laying out his California comeback plan. The state's budget surplus includes an extra $17.7 billion for public education.
That blueprint includes creating a new grade and fully implementing a commitment that all 4-year-olds will get high quality instructional education by creating that new grade. TK will now be fully implemented in the state of California, a $2.7 billion investment.
TK wouldn't be fully implemented until the 2024-25 school year. He also proposed funding universal after-school care programs as well as mental health support for children. Newsom says his plan will be formally presented to the state legislature on Friday. San Diego Unified School District announced its plans for diversifying its ranks of teachers and administrators. KPBS education reporter explains how the district hopes to encourage its students to eventually become teachers.
Currently, about 76% of San Diego Unified students identify as people of color, while just 35% of teachers are people of color. During the school board's regular meeting Tuesday, district officials detailed plans to narrow that gap. School board president Richard Barrera says the change is needed.
Leadership in the district, our principals, our top-level administrators that come from the experience and understand the experience of our students, we think leads to better teaching practices, but also is more inspiring and more motivating to students to see somebody who reflects their experiences.
The plan includes an incentive program for current San Diego Unified students to enter the teaching profession. Students will be able to start their teacher training during high school and be guaranteed employment with the district if they complete the program. San Diego Unified's Chief Human Resources Officer, Acacia Feed, said that while state law prohibits the district from setting quotas for employee demographics, these efforts will allow it to organically grow a more diverse workforce.
We're paying attention to our own practices. We're paying attention to what we're doing, what we're saying, who we're working with, and we're ensuring that our practices are not being, our actions don't reflect systemic systems of racism and bias.
Student board member Zachary Patterson applauded the effort to retain students within the community as teachers.
And I think it's a unique approach that really ensures that we have this community advocacy and we have this community-based support, which is so critical, because who better to speak on something, who better to teach a student than a student that actually went to that school.
With these plans, the district hopes to add 3% more teachers and administrators of color each year for the next 5 years. Joe Hong, KPBS News.
It is being called one of the biggest real estate deals in San Diego history. A private equity giant based out of New York has made plans to buy 66 local residential complexes for $1 billion. Blackstone Group is buying what equates to about 5,800 apartment units from the Conrad Prebys Foundation, and it intends to spend $100 million on improvements to the properties. This deal means that Blackstone Group is now the largest holder of real estate in the county. The deal is expected to close in a few days. House Republicans make a big decision about their leadership and their strategy for 2022 midterm elections and beyond. The party voted to remove Liz Cheney of Wyoming from their leadership ranks today after her pushback on former President Trump's false claims of fraud in the 2020 election. Karen Kafa looks at what's next.
Minutes after House Republicans voted her out of their number 3 leadership spot, Congresswoman Liz Cheney outlined a new mission.
We've got to get back to a position where we are a party that can fight for conservative principles, that can fight for substance. We cannot be dragged backward by the very dangerous lies of a former president.
Cheney removed from the leadership ranks after repeatedly and publicly rejecting former President Donald Trump's false claims that the 2020 election was stolen. Cheney's GOP allies shaking their heads.
The truth is that the election was not stolen. 74 million voters were not disenfranchised. They were just outnumbered. And it's important for our party to take inventory of that and go out and win the next election instead of continuing the big lie.
The vote coming just before a House panel convened another hearing into the January 6th Capitol insurrection led by Trump supporters.
Members of Congress had to be quickly evacuated because a violent mob had breached the Capitol.
Cheney's ouster signaling House Republican leaders will align with Trump in the run-up to the 2022 midterms.
I'm looking forward to being Speaker in the next Congress.
Democrats dismayed.
It appears that the big lie is no longer on the retreat among Republicans, but instead is spreading like a cancer.
GOP Representative Elise Stefanik of New York has positioned herself to succeed Cheney, even receiving Trump's backing. But some of Trump's conservative supporters say Stefanik's voting record is too moderate, teeing up another potential party split. In Washington, Karen Kafa, KPBS News.
Prices at the pump and at the supermarkets climbing higher. This hacked Colonial pipeline isn't helping matters either. Reporter Isabella Rosales looks at the hit consumers are taking.
Long lines at the pump.
It's just crazy right now, man. You just got to pray.
Some drivers hoarding gas. It's driving a panic buy that's leaving gas stations in at least 9 states on empty.
Yeah, it looks like they just ran out.
Hackers paralyzed the Colonial pipeline, which is responsible for nearly half the gas and diesel supply to the East Coast. Panicked drivers, skyrocketed demand.
It just hit us all of a sudden, like the pandemic did, so everybody's in a frenzy.
But soaring prices at the pump causing sticker shock.
6 gallons of gas for $35, that's absolutely ridiculous.
According to AAA, average gas prices across the country shot up to more than $3 a gallon for the first time in more than 6 years.
Gas price today, national gas price, has not been this high since President Biden was vice president.
Colonial Pipeline expects to restore significant service by the end of the week. In the meantime, the Biden administration is working to boost supply by relaxing some federal transportation rules, including more overtime and less sleep restrictions for drivers to add more tanker trucks on the road.
Our top priority right now is getting the fuel to communities that need it.
But it's not just gas. Expect to pay more at the grocery store.
Prices are even higher now than they were before the pandemic started.
Partly to blame are those higher gas prices, making it more expensive to transport goods. And, analysts say, a shortage in labor.
This was like a perfect storm of everything at the same time.
In Washington, Isabel Rosales, KPBS News.
San Diego port officials hope to have a better plan this fall to control air pollution near the bayfront. The Board of Port Commissioners reviewed the first draft of the proposed maritime clean air strategy yesterday. It is a policy document that explains what the port and portside businesses will do to reduce air pollution in nearby neighborhoods. National City Vice Mayor Jose Rodriguez says there needs to be a balance.
We all deserve to have clean air, clean water, and a clean environment. At the same time, we must assure future job growth, more diversification of goods through our port, and stop losing businesses to the Port of Long Beach and LA County.
Community advocates decried the pollution's health impacts. Industries talked about the cost of moving to zero-emission vehicles, and port commissioners talked about their responsibility to both businesses and the environment. A revised plan is expected to be up for consideration in September. Even though we've had multiple dry years, the region will have enough water to meet needs through 2045. That is the message from the San Diego County Water Authority. On Monday, Governor Newsom expanded the drought emergency declaration to 41 counties in northern and central California. That covers about 30% of the state's population. Southern California has largely been excluded from the declarations. The San Diego County Water Authority, however, says thanks to efforts of ratepayers and other agencies, we will have sufficient water for 2021 and the foreseeable future.
We'll have some foggy and cloudy mornings to deal with in the days to come, but they also come with some bright and sunny afternoons. Then, looking ahead to this weekend, we'll see a big temperature drop for most spots as we get this cold front that's going to be sliding southward and some energy in the upper atmosphere. And so you'll see a little bit of a drop off. No real rain here for us in Southern California, but at least we'll see a bit of a cool down. Now for tonight, though, temperatures only dropping off into the low 60s. Again, plenty of cloud cover here during the overnight period. Temperatures dropping off into the upper 50s in Oceanside, mid to upper 50s in Escondido. A little bit warmer, the higher terrain will reduce to remain in the upper 50s and low 60s. And it does look like, once again, that fog will be developing as you're waking up early on your Thursday morning, though it should clear out as we head into the afternoon hours. Shouldn't cause us too many problems out there for your Thursday. It's a hot day once again here in the Southwest for Thursday. Temperatures well above what is normal for this time of year. We're going to be up into the upper 60s and low 70s near the coast, where again it is a little bit cool, but the further inland you get, the hotter it gets, and some of the higher terrain likely going to be up into the triple digits. And then here we go. There's the cold front. It's going to be sliding southward as we go through your weekend. So for the coast, temperatures dropping off from near 70 degrees to the upper 60s. Not a big change for the coastal regions. Further inland, you'll notice a little bit more of a drop off from the mid to upper 70s for your Thursday and Friday, and to the upper 60s by the time we get to the end of the weekend on Sunday. In the mountains, we drop off from the upper 60s for highs on your Thursday, back into the 50s towards the end of the weekend, and perhaps even some low 50s out there for your Sunday and pushing into next Monday. In the desert, it's one of the biggest areas that sees a big drop off. So triple-digit heat for your Thursday, and then we fall off into the mid-80s by the time we get to the end of the weekend. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Jessica Pash.
San Diego DA Summer Stephan recently announced that her office was dissolving the last remaining gang injunctions in San Diego County. Race and equity reporter Christina Kim tells us what happens now that the injunctions are gone.
Memories, too many memories.
Travis Smith hasn't been to his grandmother's house on J Street in Southeast San Diego in over a decade. As we walk towards the newly painted blue house, he stops.
Well, like I said, when I first walked up, it was just like, boom, I got hit with so many memories. This is my daddy's house when he was a kid, you know what I mean? So definitely, through the generations, You know, this is home. It's always going to be home. It will always be my home.
But for 13 years, the now 37-year-old Smith couldn't go home. His name was put on a gang injunction, a court order that determined where he could and couldn't be. His grandmother's house was right in the middle of a restricted area. In 2006, when his name was added to the gang injunction, Smith was a member of the West Coast Crips. Years before, Smith had been convicted of gun possession, as well as drug possession and sales. But he says the crimes weren't gang-related, and he'd already finished his probation. Smith still remembers what went through his head when 2 gang officers knocked on his mother's door and told him that he was on a gang injunction.
How is this going to work? How am I not going to go to this store that I've been going to for 20-some years? How am I not going to go to this park that I've been hanging out at for, how? That was how.
The main idea behind gang injunctions is if you make it extremely difficult for gang members to congregate or live in a community, they'll eventually go away and the community will be better off. Smith says he understands the need to end gang violence and he doesn't make excuses about his choices. But he is among many who say the injunctions have harmed far more people than they've helped. People like his grandmother who passed away in 2010.
They did a number, but yeah, my family, not being able to see your grandsons. You used to seeing your grandsons out front barbecuing, eating, macaroni and cheese, and then next thing you know, you don't see them, and you're older. That's the American dream, right? To get you a house and have your grandsons and your kids dwelling around, right? Well, they took that from us because of your gang member.
Many law enforcement leaders have come around to Smith's way of thinking in recent years. San Diego County DA Summer Stephan began removing names from gang injunction lists 2 years ago. And in April, she announced that her office was ending all of the county's remaining gang injunctions. The change in Stephan's approach, however, has been slow. In 2019, she was against a recommendation by the city's gang commission to immediately end all injunctions.
So I may not act as quickly as somebody might like me to act, because I have a duty to take thoughtful, considered action to make sure that I don't have collateral damage.
She says the process of methodically reviewing cases for the past few years has changed her mind, even though she's still not convinced the injunctions didn't reduce gang violence during their peak use.
What I've learned is that you always have to be open-minded to change, and that things that worked in law enforcement years ago may be cast too wide of a net.
For Smith, the scars from being caught up in that net run deep, and they won't just go away because there's been a shift in policy. During the visit to his old neighborhood, he heads to Mullins Market and Liquor Store on the busy corner of Imperial and 30th. As he looks at the building where his former church used to be, 2 police cars drive by and 1 parks across the street.
Every time I came over here, I had to be mindful that I can be stopped by the police because they know who I am. I always had to be mindful. This is the worst part. I'm not on an injunction. I'm not a part of a gang. And just standing right here, I still feel like, you know what I'm saying? Even seeing this police officer, that's what when I was talking about that trauma from being jacked up by the gang suppression, and this is it right here.
How do you feel seeing that police right there?
I thought he was coming to mess with us, to be honest with you. Thought he was coming for me.
Inez Corona says she hears experiences like what happened to Smith all the time. She's a therapist at Rise Up Industries, a nonprofit that works exclusively with former gang members who have been incarcerated.
You've been conditioned when you have so many of these negative interactions, right, that are oftentimes violent, frightening. You feel helpless.
Corona says it's important to address former gang members' mental health and re-entry into society.
Because it's not an individual problem, it's a community problem, and it has a ripple effect and impacts all of us.
Travis Smith wants to see programs like Rise Up Industries in his old neighborhood. He can't help but wonder what might have happened if he'd been given therapy instead of being placed on the injunction. Now a minister who's been sober for 14 years and the father of 4 girls, he says institutions that upheld gang injunctions have a part to play in rebuilding communities.
You got to come back and you have to bring healing with you.
After we part ways, Smith will drive 20 miles to get to his current house. He's still undoing years of conditioning that kept him away from these places that used to be home. Christina Kim, KPBS News.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, dividing lines. Liz Cheney is ousted from House Republican leadership. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
And here's another look at today's top stories. Rady Children's Hospital is now scheduling COVID-19 vaccination appointments for children aged 12 to 15. Nearly 176,000 young people in San Diego County will be able to get their first Pfizer shot as soon as tomorrow with the approval of a parent or guardian. They'll also need some sort of ID like a birth certificate or a school ID that shows their age. And the San Diego Convention Center has sheltered 2,629 unaccompanied children since late March, according to numbers obtained by KPBS. 989 children have been reunited with family members or sponsors, with those numbers increasing in recent days as the process has been streamlined by the federal government. Currently, 71 children are in isolation after testing positive for COVID-19. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation. Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.